Hey Danny, how are you?
Hey Erwin, how's it going? I'm doing good.
Good to see you again. Great to see that beautiful smile. Thank you for joining us today.
I do my best. Yeah, no, I'm super excited. Thanks for having me.
Do you know what we're doing here with our channel, with our podcast, right? We've been providing good content and information about our experiences with our group, and I've been trying to get you on for a while now. So I'm so happy. We're so happy to have you on, and you have a very unique story, a story of not just doing things locally in the U.S., but going from the U.S. America's region all the way to Europe. And I find it fascinating, with things that you've done and that have accomplished. And you've got such a great personality. And for me, I love the mixture and the culture you bring from the US culture, mixing it with the German, now Austrian culture, European culture, and you bring so much and just that energy, that aura. I've always told you this and people that, when we talk, I just love it. You can feel it oozing through the screen, right? So you're like, oh my gosh, Danny's great.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you and to, there's people that are considering moving for whatever reason, work, person they love, they care, new life challenges, new culture. You did it. You went from the US, you went to Europe, right? And kind of talk about your journey first on, what got you to think about this in the beginning? What made you say, hey, you know what? I go try something different internationally. Like I'd like to kind of preface it by that way first. Let us know what you think. Like what got you
Yeah.
started.
No, honestly, it was never something I thought of doing or imagined doing. I remember even when I was a little kid, I asked my parents when I was 7 years old if I could have the house when they died. And they were kind of like, okay, first of all, who asks this? Second of all, who asks this when they're 7 years old? I never wanted to leave California. I was born and raised in the same house that my parents live in to this day. And I always wanted to stay at home. I was a homebody in little Auburn, California. And then my parents offered to me when I was 18 that if I wanted to, they would fully support me taking a graduation trip. And I wanted to go to Mexico. I wanted to go take tequila shots on the beach. And they said, absolutely not. Why don't you go to Germany? There's an exchange program with your high school. Your sister did it a few years ago. She loved it. Why don't you go to Germany? And I was terrified. I remember when we were getting ready to get on the bus to go to San Francisco International Airport, and I was so terrified, and I felt so just nervous and sick, and actually ended up having my tonsils. I had tonsillitis. I didn't know it
Oh,
at the day when we were on the bus. I thought I was just nervous, but yeah, it turned into full blown tonsillitis when we arrived here. That's a different story. But so I came, and the way that I thought about it when I was sitting on the plane over here, when I was getting ready, packing and everything was, I'm going to go. I'm terrified. I'm scared. But in the worst case, I hate it. And then I never have to come back. And it's just 3 weeks in my life. What can happen in 3 weeks? Well, here I am, after living here for 15 years. And I was here and, it was, first of all, it was so much fun. I mean, Europe is it's a very, very different world, very open-minded, almost in a way. I hope this doesn't sound like childish, but everyone's just a little bit silly, which I kind of love, is that there's just this almost this silliness to them. Even Germans, who I know we all make the jokes, they don't have a sense of humor. They are. And I just kind of loved that it was also a little bit open, just the cultural. And, within these 3 weeks, we went to Austria, we went to Italy, we did these things and it was like, wow, this is all like right next door to each other. This is so cool. And then, of course, I ended up meeting a guy on that trip. And based on that, I was not expecting it to go anywhere. I thought, okay, I'm on my graduation trip. It's fine. Little fun never hurt anyone. And then after about 2.5 years after I'd gotten back from my exchange trip, we were talking and he was all set and ready to go to university here. I had tried to go to college in the States. I went to a junior college for a year. I hated it. It was not what I wanted to be doing. It was not what I connected with or felt any sort of like even real motivation to do. And I decided after a year to stop. And this was also part of my decision was I thought I'll go to Europe because they do have a good They have a much better education system, and I'll try it out. I'll see what happens. So I moved here a month after I turned 21. I actually moved from my room in my parents' house to Munich, Bavaria. It was the first time that I'd ever left home, ever lived anywhere else. And I started fresh here. Started language school, which was exhausting. I've never slept so well in my life. Doing, 6 to 8 hours a day of just German, 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 German. And it was weird because when I first got here, and I think this is very typical of Americans as well, I thought I'm never going to have to learn German because everybody speaks English. And granted, that's true, but I had no idea, in a way, how rude that was of me. I'm so grateful now that I did do the language courses right at the beginning and that I took it as seriously as I did, because it's definitely been a huge factor in me being able to have been here for as long as I have and been able to do as much as I've done while being here. And oddly enough, after 6 months of language school, the guy and I decided to call it quits. And I thought to myself, okay, I can pack my bags, go back to California. And it was all just a decision that I made. And to be honest, I was too stubborn and I thought I just turned my life upside down. I am not going to let this relationship define my decisions, my bigger decisions. I'm going to stay longer and I'm going to see where it leads me. And I then did a year as an au pair. So I worked for a year with a family, which is honestly not something that I do suggest to a lot of people. I had a lot of girlfriends around that time asking me about it. And my mentality was, rather save up your cash and then come to Europe and just do a few weeks of traveling around. Because when you work for a family here, they are dependent on you. And that's where we come back a little bit more to where the Germans and their, yes, their sense of humor is there. But when you're full-time living and working with a family or full-time just being super immersed in the culture, it's different and it's not, a vacation. And that's something that I adapted to within the first couple of months of living and working here when I was doing both at the same time. I really started to realize that it's a very different environment than in America. It's a very different type of work ethic. And that kind of led me on to decide that if I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this right, it's going to be exhausting. And it's going to be really challenging for me. So during my au pair year, I decided to sign up for what's here called an Ausbildung. And that's pretty much just vocational training in America. So you kind of pick the direction you want to go into and you do, maybe 2 or 3 years where you either do full-time theoretical, full-time practical, and then you can either mix it. So that was where I actually really got my first taste of the German systems.
Like the culture, you're talking about like the culture of how Germans process and how they work. And let me ask you this. This is an interesting thing, right?
Mhm.
You've unpacked a lot there, and this is awesome because a lot of people have different, journeys, right? And I think what is really interesting, you talked about, okay, you chose Germany or Europe to go instead of Mexico, which was cool. You didn't speak German. So I always thought like you already knew some sort of German language or dialect before going there, but I did not know that you actually picked it up after the fact, after you were already there. So 6 months of it. And like you said, maybe I need to go take some foreign classes or maybe German one night too, maybe, who knows? But it's really nice because you talked about, hey, you liked it there. Obviously, you had a great time. You met people. Then you said, I want to stay here. You had a leap of faith, right? And you had that initial culture shock. You kind of said like, hey, I assumed everyone speaks English and they didn't. And I think the message I got from you was, don't make the assumption, right? And kind of, you discovered yourself like, hey, it's kind of rude to think that way. Although people would kind of, make that a safe assumption anyway when we all travel. But I think, people dream about moving abroad, right, Danny? And they're like, hey, I want to just pack my boxes and do this. You kind of had it in a way sense where you went in on a trip, you discovered, you loved, what you were experiencing, you met great people, you were able to kind of talk to, but what would you say was the catalyst movement for saying, hey, I'm going to go here and move? Obviously, there was someone you met, right? But it had to be more than that. What was the catalyst to say, I'm going to stay here? I'm packing and I'm going to Can you pinpoint one or two things that were like catalysts for that?
For me, it was something, and it's a mentality that I've really tried to keep ever since I was actually writing my senior paper, like, so when I was graduating high school, is that if I don't do this, no one else is going to do it. Like, I need to do it. Not doing it is not an option. And that was something that I've really stayed with for my whole life. And this was something that when I was in my au pair year and when I was considering doing this additional training, and also through all of my struggles in language school, just in the very beginning, I thought, if I don't do it, it won't happen. And this was really eye opening for me. This was something where I really felt like I want to do it and I want to do it right and I want to do it well. And I just knew that I had to push through, as frustrating as it was, or as it's still to this day. We're talking here now 15 years ago was when I moved here. And there are still times where I have to say that sentence to myself: if you don't do it, it won't happen. And that's been really something that I've really strived for. And I've pushed. I've definitely pushed myself further than I thought that I could, or further than I even knew that I could, in being here. And what I tell a lot of the females in my life, because you're absolutely right, Erwin, I have met so many people, so many amazing people in being here for as long as I have. And I really have to say, I have met some incredible women. I am surrounded by incredible women. And something that I tell them is a human, a person, is much stronger than you think they are. Like, and you yourself. So you as a person are stronger than you're giving yourself credit for. Because if push comes to shove, if you need to do something, damn it, you're going to do it. And you can do it. And it's hard.
No, and you're doing it, right? And this is the great thing. You're doing it, right? And obviously, you went in, you acclimated, your first few months or years in there, there's this blur of bureaucracy, and I might be pronouncing this wrong. And Anmeldung, I think that's registration, right? You have to kind of register yourself into the culture. And, I guess what was the hardest part? Again, you did this move, you decided to stay. What were the kind of the first one or two top hardest things you had to cope with, right? That traveling didn't prepare you for when you were finally in a foreign country, Germany or Austria?
There are, I think, too many things to count, unfortunately, but I would say the top two were, it's very different when you're visiting a foreign country for a few days or a few weeks and just kind of traveling around. And as we talked about before, with everybody speaks English.
Yeah.
When you move to a country as a quote unquote foreigner and coming in, it is so difficult because people hear the accent, or they hear the imperfect, language that they speak natively. And they automatically don't take you seriously. It's
Yeah.
automatically this stigma of, oh, you're foreign. Okay. Well, yes, but there's a big but with that. That would be one of the things that I would definitely say has been difficult for me, just as a human. Second thing, which I you kind of touched on before, which is absolutely the case in Germany as well as Austria, is the bureaucratic system. And I can't tell you, it was funny you said the word Anmeldung before, like signing in or signing up for things. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
You did great. There was a building that I spent a lot of hours of my life at in Munich, and it's called the Kreisverwaltungsreferat. It's about 30 letters long, and it is the immigration office. And it was filling out form 3-1, and then you get up to the front of the line after you've been waiting for hours, and they're like, oh, well, you filled out 7-1.4. That's not the right one. You have to come back tomorrow. Okay, well, I work tomorrow. Okay, well, I have night classes tomorrow, or things of that nature. And it's almost like this very closed-minded system in being here. And I know not every country is like that, and I know that not every place in the world has things like that, but Germany is definitely famous for it. That everything runs on a very well-oiled machine.
Of course.
And it has definitely caused some issues. I remember crying at that office because they told me, even though I'd filled out all my forms and I had all of my, contracts, my medical insurance, because legally you have to have it here, even as a visiting tourist or as a visiting foreign language student, you have to have medical insurance. And I remember having all of this paperwork and getting to the front of the line and them saying, no, you can't stay. You have to book your flight back. You can't stay any longer. And I just remember feeling like I'm working so hard to be here and I'm doing my part and I'm fluent. At that point I was fluent in the language. How could it be that I can't stay? But sure enough, as I always did, I found a way. I figured it all out and I had a lot of help from friends, from coworkers, from just people who I depended on, people who I now consider to be my family. It's my chosen family. And it's been an incredible experience, but hell yes, it has been very difficult.
Well, I love the thing you said earlier too. You mentioned friends a lot, right? That support group, of people that welcomed you and that help you transition, right? And I think that's important. A lot of the things that we always push. We have these conversations with people is the support you need, right? The checking in on people, and it's great you had that going in, and you might not have had it in the beginning, like you said. You went in, you took that leap of faith, you got in there and you met a lot of good people, and obviously not surprised with your personality. You've got that glowing personality, that smile. So obviously, people gravitate to that, right? Now, here's one thing that's curious, right? Dealing with the longing and the gap, right? From not being back here, right? So what would you say would be like kind of the one Americanism, let's just say, that you refuse to let go of, right? Like, is it the way you celebrate like Thanksgiving? Your need for maybe possibly if you ever use ice cubes, because we all love it here in the US,
Ugh, okay. I'm
because
not a
or
fan,
perhaps it's
but
that,
but
that
that is
American
very
can,
true.
and then or that it's that can-do optimism that some people in some countries don't have because like you said earlier, hey, when it's time's done, right? So that's why we're kind of, looked at in a, either good or bad, with us always optimistic and going the extra miles here. But what would you say would be the one thing you refuse to let go?
There are so many things, and people ask this a lot, actually. You'd be surprised, or when people ask this a lot. What do you miss most about the States? Or what do you prefer here, in being here? And it's a very difficult question to answer. Both have good and bad. And it's a very interesting, actually, thing that I personally find. The thing that I was not willing to give up or change in moving here was my loud, outgoing, crazy personality. And it's very funny. I work in sales, and I've worked in sales for almost 10 years now, 3 different companies. And I love it. And I'm one of the last people on earth. I make a joke a lot. I'm one of the last people, where I'd rather work with a person than a computer. But that's something that I just didn't want to change or give up or let, Germany or Austria take from me, is that I'm very outgoing. I'm very loud. I had a customer yesterday and I was talking to her for maybe 15, 20 minutes just about, why she needed this new product and what was kind of going on in her life. And we talked, and then talking to a colleague later in the break room, and I was telling her, oh, yeah, I had this client before and she was moving here and did this. And she said, you talked to her about all that? And I said, well, yeah, that's who I am. That's what I do. I,
It's getting
I,
to know
I want to
people,
meet
right?
everybody. I want to know everybody's got a story. And I wanna know them all. That's unfortunately with me a little bit of my just who I am, and it's who I've always been, and, it's something that I've had bosses, colleagues, friends, even my mother tell me, you need to hold yourself back a little bit more. You need to fit more into this, this what's expected of you as being a female in the professional world. And I have just always not even meant to, but I just have always not been able to help it. I am who I am, and I've just always been like that. And it's something that I just hope never changes. And that's interesting, actually, that you bring that up or mention that, because when I do meet girls, people in general, but definitely who are moving to Germany or Austria, from a foreign country, whether they speak the language or not, whether or not it's their first time being here or not, my biggest thing that I tell them is you just don't lose yourself. You're fiery, you're energetic, you're loud. And you know what? They'll love you for it. And it's what I always try and tell people is just, if you're being you and if you're being true to who you are, then everything else will come together. Whether it be financial, emotional, personal success, it will come through you being true to who you are.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
mentality has always been, as long as you're not an asshole, I don't care.
Well, and that's why, like, if you think about you, right? I mean, that's why you've always received these compliments. We've complimented you. I mean, you have, like I said, we'll call it the aura. You have that aura that is gravitate, people gravitate to it, so that's why it's a great thing to have. Not everyone has it. What would you say now, you know, going back to the US, right? Does it feel like you're guessing your own home now? Do you feel like mostly, you're at home today? Like obviously it's been 15 years, but when you travel back, how often do you come back to visit, back to US, back home? How does that feel for you when you come back?
Whenever I get off the plane, or better said, when I get out of the car in my parents' driveway and I just breathe in, and I mean, I know you're also from a similar area in California, you kind of breathe in like that eucalyptus, that blackberry, that fig smell, and I just know I'm home. Even if
Yeah.
I've been here in Europe for so long, and if Europe is my home, those roots run deep, and it is something that I have never been, will never be ashamed of or sad about or anything. It's something that I love about myself, is having those roots. When I'm home, I try to go normally about once a year. Some years it works out, some years it doesn't. I normally try to go to California once a year, and when I'm there, it's in a way, it's so weird, Erwin. It's like no time has gone by at all. And then at the same time, then I go and see friends, and I see, oh yeah, that's right, you had 2 kids a few years ago and they're taller than me now. Or, oh, that's right, they closed that bar and they opened up a new cafe there. That's right. And so there are things that definitely change, and there are things that, shift around. That's just normal. But for me, when I'm home, man, I'm home.
You never forget where you come from, right? And I
Never.
love what you just said, because the whole thing that resonated with me, and I'm sure it'll resonate with everyone else listening, is you're getting off the plane and you're taking you're breathing it in, right? You're like you said, that core memory, right? Like it's imprinted, So I love that. I love that because, hey, I could do the same thing when I go back to the islands or anywhere that I have core memories, or that things that have imprinted. So never forget. And I love that. In closing, let me ask you one last question, right? So if you could go back in time to that girl at the airport with that one-way ticket, right? Think about that one-way ticket. What's the one piece of advice you would give her about the woman she's about to become in Deutschland?
Well, first thing I would say is, girl, you need a little bronzer. You're looking a little pale. I see pictures now and I'm like, oh man, why did no one say anything? But that's different. Something I told someone a few years ago, and this is truly something I believe in for everyone, I hate the word regret because you can't change it anyway. So what's the point? And I think one thing that I would absolutely think, as being that little 21-year-old girl who was getting, I'm moving to Germany. Oh my God, it's going to be great. Is I think she would see me now and she would be like, really? That's me? I did all of that? That's fucking awesome. Like, that's awesome. Which is a really cool realization to have when you think that your, earlier self would be proud of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one thing that I would tell her is that take it as it comes. Take it day by day. It's all always going to work out.
Right.
Because my life has changed so many times in the last 15 years since I moved here. And even when I didn't understand it, I tried my hardest to go with it. And I cannot tell you about how much I've learned and grown through that. And I am so happy about that. It is an incredible realization to have.
I love it. You shared the resiliency. You went through a lot and you continued to fight the path forward no matter what. You could have made an excuse, you could have tucked tailed and run. And then you shared about the beauty of the life you're living now, right? Germany, Austria. And one thing I'll touch on, that's a lot of bravery, Dani, right? A lot of people, yes, you had some great time, but you still had to have the courage to do it. So, in closing to the folks listening, right? Take the leap, take the risk, guys. You got nothing to lose, especially when you have the time, be brave, enjoy it. Dani shared a great story of what she didn't expect. She went from Mexico, now living in Europe, in Austria, through Germany. So I think, look at that. Not everything's going to be perfect. There will be bumps in the road, but I think it's the being resilient and persistent that, gets you there. So Dani, thank you for, taking your valuable time today to talk through your journey. What a fantastic journey, and we can't wait to hear more from you with where it continues to lead into. You've got a lot of great successes that you've already accomplished, a lot more ahead of you, and just want to say thank you so much and appreciate you for joining in.
No, I say thank you so much, Erwin. It was a total, it was a pleasure to be here and it was super fun. And I'm just happy to have met you and just really appreciate everything that you do. You're a great, great guy. Yeah. No, thank
Thank you,
you.
Dani. We'll be talking again soon here.
Sounds good. Can't wait. Talk soon. Danke.